Hey everyone, this is heyybritny and welcome back to my channel. Okay, so this is going to be my most controversial video. Buckle up and let's go. Alrighty, so in this episode, we are going to be talking about the all-white community that is being built in Arkansas, and we're also going to be talking about other things that are connected to this issue that people may not be aware of and not think about when they are trying to decide if this is something that should be allowed or if this is something that should be prevented from happening. So first, let's talk about the mixed reaction. So some people are saying, hey, why is this happening? Why do they feel the need to do this? Why are they intentionally wanting to separate themselves? Are they wanting to remove themselves from minorities? Are they allowed to do this legally? And then other reactions are, who cares? Great, good for you, not bothered, that sort of thing. In doing this video, I knew that I did not want to do a stereotypical video that is bashing the bad apples or the bad faith actors in the Black community. I've been seeing a lot of that, and I think it is right to call out that behavior, but I wanted to look at this issue from a historical and a social lens versus just pointing out things that are happening now, because I think that context matters when you're looking at this issue. So this video is to provide a different narrative to what you are seeing currently out there in social media, on YouTube, and other platforms. I also want to give a quick disclaimer because I am going to be talking about religion. I'm not going to be criticizing any one religion, but I am going to focus on the institution of religion and give my commentary on that as well. So in this episode, there are two things that I'm going to be focusing on. I'm going to be focusing on the idea of racial superiority and then also race and cultural differences, as well as bad behavior in the general population. And since the purpose of this video is to talk about the all-white community that is being built in Arkansas, I do want to state that I do think that this sort of thing should be allowed as long as other races can do the same thing. Additionally, I don't like the idea of people being able to do this in rural areas that are not accessible because you have no idea what's going on. And then also that's just really like cult-like behavior. But a good example of this is Chinatown in New York City. So this is integrated amongst the city. It's not in a rural area. It's not completely isolated. Anybody can access this area, and also this is built on pride of wanting to be around people who have a shared heritage, but it's not done in a way where it rejects other people. It's right there in the middle of a city. Anyone can access it. Anyone, if you don't want to be a part of that environment, then literally you just don't go to Chinatown. It's not intentionally keeping people out of that area. I also want to state that I don't think that forced segregation should happen again, but I do believe that if people want to self-segregate and remove themselves from the general population, that should totally be allowed as long as they're not infringing on the rights of other people and they are not using those communities to terrorize other racial groups. If people want to self-segregate, that just allows the people who do want to have a mixed race population or mixed race community, that just allows the people who actually want that to better be able to coexist and mingle and to really work on improving those relationships and fixing the community. So when I first came across this story, I first thought of the Amish community. So if you're not familiar with the Amish community, this is basically a predominantly, if not all white community. They reject modern technology, the modern world, and they are very old school. We let them live in peace, they let us live in peace, that sort of thing, and this is totally acceptable. Now obviously that community is created and founded based on religious principles, so that is a separate issue, but this community isn't something that I see a lot of people complaining about or having an issue with. This is just kind of like the status quo. We know that this is a thing, and we're not actively trying to break up that community or interfere with whatever they have going on. And so I think that that's totally fine. And in this sense, all races should be able to have their own separate space. And I'm going to dig into that a little bit more, but I do believe that all races should be able to have their separate spaces, and that should be allowed. And if you have an issue with that, I think that there's something else going on, and I want to explore that in this episode. So now let's talk about Black spaces and communities. So I've been seeing a lot of commentary in relation to this topic and this issue that people push back by saying, well, Black people have Black only colleges, scholarships, that sort of thing. And I think that yes, those things do exist, but really for the Black community, it is done out of a need to correct past historical wrongs done to the Black community. It was done to make sure that Black people had safe spaces and that they also had equal opportunity to succeed despite America's history with slavery. we also have Black neighborhoods. We typically know these neighborhoods as the hood. However, these are usually low-income areas. They are crime-ridden areas, and they are also neighborhoods that are not in the best conditions compared to other neighborhoods, middle-class neighborhoods, that sort of thing. So just because Black people have neighborhoods just for them, it doesn't mean that it is producing the best living environment and the best culture. And we all know that the hood is completely different from living in a racially mixed environment. It's just a completely different culture, different world. And it's almost like if you only know the hood as your worldview, you are going to be completely shut out from a different way of living as far as being able to integrate with different races, form those relationships, but then also function in the real world where everything is not specifically for Black people. And speaking of Black neighborhoods, I wanted to make a point about this because I saw a Nick Fuentes interview where he was doing an interview with Jake Shields, and they were talking about how Black people, once they get money, they move away from the hood or Black neighborhood. And I think that they're conflating the two when they talk about that. So yes, that does happen. When people get a little bit of money, they will move away from their Black neighborhoods into middle class or rich neighborhoods that are more racially diverse. However, it's not as simple as saying they are doing that to get away from Black people specifically. They are really doing that to get away from the culture that is associated with that area and with that group of people just because of the environment that they grew up in. It's really a desire to get away from a certain mindset, a certain living situation, and to be able to move upwards in life. Upwards mobility is a thing. Anyone who gets money, they are going to want to upgrade their lifestyle. They are going to want to make changes that is in reflection of the wealth that they have. And if you have the money to buy a bigger house in a better neighborhood, anyone would do that. And it's not just something that's done with Black people. All races do that, and I think that this is totally fine, but I think they are conflating the two. Yes, there are some people who don't want to live around ghetto Black people, and that's fine. There are people who don't want to live around ghetto white people or people that we would consider to be trailer park people. There are people who don't want to live in that situation, and as soon as they get money, they leave that environment immediately. And it's not because of the race, it's the culture, it's the environment, it's the values. And so I think that that is a conflation of the two, and it's done or it's said to make the Black community as a whole look bad, and it's not reflecting a specific group of people who are in the Black community who are impacted by the culture that they are in. So I live in a racially mixed neighborhood. There's about 2,000 plus homes, and it's mostly white, but there are minorities, Black people, and people of other races here. This could just be ignorance on my part, but I don't know of a all Black community that is middle class to upper class that has that many homes for all Black people. Usually you'll see smaller neighborhoods for all Black people, and they're either in certain parts of town or they're historical neighborhoods, they're older homes and that sort of thing. I would love to see Black people in modern, new, middle class neighborhoods that are all Black, where Black people can thrive. You have two-parent households, you have the dad working, the mom might be a stay-at-home mom or she has a good job too. You have an area in a neighborhood where the kids can hang out, they can do things without getting in too much trouble, or if they do get in trouble, it's just normal everyday teenager thing. It's not teenagers going out to rob people, to beat people up, and that sort of degenerate behavior. And so I don't know of a community like that in every state, in every city, in every major city, where Black people, if they want to live amongst Black people, they have different options as far as the types of Black communities that they can live in. It really seems like it's only the hood, or you move to a racially integrated neighborhood. It's not that you can live in the hood, then you can live in a nice Black middle class neighborhood that's all Black, or you can live in a nice super rich Black neighborhood where you are amongst other Black people who are wealthy and should share the same values as you. So it seems like you're going from one extreme to the other. You're either in a low income Black neighborhood that's crime ridden, has a lot of degenerate behavior, or you have to go to a racially mixed neighborhood in order to have that upwards mobility. Okay, so let's talk about race and culture because I really think that this is connected to the whole issue of people wanting to have an all-white community and feeling the need to self-segregate. So I know that traditionally or historically, white people do believe that they are superior to other races, in particular Black people. And in me talking about this, I don't want anyone to think that I dislike white people, that I hate all white people or anything like that. This is really just a historical analysis of things that have happened in America. So I enjoy being in a racially mixed environment. I do not want to see America become a country that's literally half divided between minorities and white people. I don't think that that should ever be accepted or allowed to happen. However, I think it is important to dispel what I think are negative narratives or negative commentary that is not helping this issue. So I reject the notion that white people are superior to other races, and I really think that it is culture that determines how you think about the world, how you behave, and what customs you practice. And in speaking about intelligence or people being smart and all of that stuff, one example that I want to give is just asking questions. So intelligent people, smart people, people who are thinking critically, they ask questions. On the other hand, you have people who accept the status quo. They don't ask any questions. They just go along with the program. They're robots, right? So in terms of my example, this could be framed as white people ask more questions and Black people ask less questions. I don't think that that's the thing. I really think that it is your environment and the people you are around who shape how you perceive the world and how your brain is developed and how you function in the world. So for example, if you were to put a white baby, a white infant, a white newborn with an African tribe, that baby is going to grow up doing and performing the customs of the African tribe that it was raised in. That baby is not going to be like, hey, I'm white, I know a better way to live. They are just going to adapt to and do whatever the people around them are doing. They're going to think like them. They are not going to perceive this way of life as being wrong because that's all they know. So to go back to the example of questions that I gave, so say for example, you grow up in an environment where it is okay to ask questions, you're encouraged to ask questions, and that allows you to think about different things and to also expand your knowledge of the world. However, if you grow up in an environment where you are disciplined and told not to ask questions, that is going to stunt your growth and it's going to make you not want to question anything, and you are really limiting yourself. So I really think it is the environment that you grow up and what you are encouraged to do. Discipline also plays a role in this. If you are never disciplined when you do bad acts or bad behavior, that is also going to reinforce that it is okay to behave like that. And so we do have a culture where people don't discipline their kids as much, and then we also have a culture of where people try to discipline their kids, but it doesn't get anywhere. The kids are literally bad kids and they don't want to listen to their parents. And so I think that those are two separate issues, because I think it's worse when you have parents who do not discipline their kids and do not take that action to make sure that they are behaving politely, respectfully, and can function in a normal society. I think it is a different issue when you have kids who are behaving badly, because you know that it's that specific kid who is the problem. It's not the parents. They are doing their best to get the kid on the right track, but for whatever reason, it is not working. And so when you have a community of kids who aren't being disciplined or who aren't following the rules or who are just disregarding anything that anybody says to them, that is a problem that needs to be addressed. And with that being said, there is a call for action in the Black community to call out degenerate behavior that they are seeing from other Black people who are behaving badly or making the rest of the race look bad. And I don't want to spend too much time on this because I know that this is important to correct that behavior, but I don't want to focus on that so much just because I know that there are already a lot of videos talking about that. But I do want to stress that it is important to acknowledge that all races have fringe members of society. All races have people that they are embarrassed by, people that they don't want to associate with. So this is not specifically a Black issue right now. It's just really highlighted in the Black community. I think the Black community is the backbone of America. There is a lot of cultural influence that comes from Black America, and I think that that is why you see a lot of attention on what Black people are doing. I think if Asians were behaving badly, you wouldn't really think about that as much because we don't really think of Asians as being the backbone of America. They are not the people who are influencing American culture. So I want to make sure that we are not labeling a whole entire community just because of what a small group of people are doing. Okay, so let's talk about Black American culture. So this is definitely not what it was in the 50s and 60s. Today's Black culture is mostly degenerate behavior, and this is a result of welfare, the dope boys in the 70s and the 80s, and rap music of the 90s. So you can't say that all of this came out of nowhere. There were strategic moves and things that were done to undermine the Black community and make sure that the Black community could not succeed and uplift itself as an entire population. With that being said, there also is the distinction between Black culture and ghetto culture. People really want to separate, hey, Black culture, these are people who are Black, who care about their property, who behave politely in society, who have good jobs, who want to get along with different races and get along with different people, and they want to have really good quality of life. Then you have ghetto behavior where people are just doing whatever, whenever. They have no regard for anybody else. They are difficult to be around. They are miserable to be around. And when you have that ghetto behavior, it really does make it difficult for the average person to be able to live their life if they're constantly dealing with people who have ghetto behavior. And I do want to clarify that ghetto behavior is not specific to Black people. All races have people who do ghetto behavior. Okay, so getting back to white people wanting their own community, I don't see an issue with this as long as other races can also have their own community. I also think that this should be in a way that still allows people to function in the general population. I don't believe that people should be entirely removing themselves from society. And I don't have an issue with this as long as people are not buying property way above market values to prevent other people from getting that property, and as long as they are not using government funds or taxpayer money to fund these new towns, these new communities. I think it's important to point out that I do think that white people are wanting to self-segregate for the wrong reasons. I think there is this naive belief that all white people are good, all white people are moral, and if you just remove or get away from minorities, this will fix all of your problems. I don't think that that is the case. Any society, regardless of the race of the people in that society, are going to have to deal with the typical problems that come with being a community of people who have to work and live and coexist together. So yes, you may eliminate minorities from your communities by making it white only, but you're still going to have to deal with bad faith people who are coming into your communities and causing trouble and causing problems. Just because you are all the same skin color or you all have the same values doesn't mean that you will all behave in the same way, especially when you get pushed to your breaking point. In addition to wanting to get away from minorities, the other thing that is driving this need to self-segregate is wanting to preserve your race or your culture. So I think that if we look at this from a historical perspective, this makes sense, but it also doesn't. So if we think about American slavery, we know that white people, European settlers, brought over people from different countries to work in forced labor to generate a profit for the people who owned the plantation and were in power. We also know that white people, white men in particular, had no problem with procreating with Black slaves. We know that this produced children, and in producing children, even if you didn't claim them, you are still creating more Black people. You are not creating more of your race. And I know that the people who are alive today were not the ones who were doing this behavior back then when we did have slavery, but my point is there was no sense of preserving your culture back then. It was just, let's create as many Black people so that they can do the dirty work, they can make us money, and we can live our rich, fancy lives. So I think that there is a kind of hypocrisy in that now you want to preserve your culture after you have made certain decisions that have created the world as we know it today in America. So going back to the example of the Amish community, so we know that the Amish community is generally accepted and it's founded on religious reasons. This is not what's happening with this all-white community in Arkansas. This is really just about getting away from minorities. And in my opinion, it's kind of a way to run away from the problems that your ancestors have created. It's also very different from the Amish community because the Amish community does not have a history of forcing people from other countries, from their home country, to come to America and endure forced labor in harsh conditions to generate a profit for other people. So when these white people want to self-segregate, they are not giving themselves the clean slate that they think they are. They are just running away from the problems that their ancestors have created, in my opinion. I also think that it's ironic that these people's ancestors, European people who first came to America, that they brought over people from other countries, minorities from other countries. In doing so, they created a mixed race society, and they were okay with that as long as they were benefiting from the forced labor of minorities. Now that they are no longer in power, at least not the way they were back then, and they don't really have control over what is happening in society, now they are wanting to say, okay, I think we need separate spaces. Everybody go back to either your distinct neighborhood or your actual home country where your ancestors were from. And I don't think that that is a solution because for a lot of us in America, America is the only country that we know. We don't have a home country in the sense that we came from somewhere else. We only know America. We were born in America. So I don't think the whole argument of go back to your home country makes any sense. If I were to go to Africa now to live, I probably would not do well in Africa. My point is to say, telling people to go back to their home country when their home country is America does not make any sense in my opinion. And to fix this problem of having racial tension in America, you definitely can't try to get rid of all of the minorities and either send them to prison or send them to different countries, like to deport them or anything like that. I think that that is absolutely the wrong take to have. If you are trying to fix race relations in America, you have to acknowledge historically what has happened between white people and black people and people of other races as well, if you truly want to make a difference and improve things in this country. It's important to recognize that people a long time ago made crappy decisions that we are all having to deal with in today's climate. And we know that slavery lasted for 400 years, so it probably will take the same amount of time for this issue to truly be fixed and reversed and addressed, just because you can't have people in slavery for 400 years and then think that 100 years, 200 years is enough time to balance the scales again. You have to give it way more time and you have to do way more in order to truly fix the imbalance and the power structure and all of that stuff that happened a long time ago, because again, we are still dealing with the effects of that today. And speaking about how we have these black communities, we have these black spaces, and yes, people thought that that was the solution. People thought that welfare was the solution. People thought that creating a bunch of high-rises in New York City for black people and minorities to live was the solution to everything. I actually wish that a lot of black people could have single-family homes with enough space in their backyard and in their front yard to be able to have their own space and to live in a different environment. I used to live in New York City and I did not live in one of those high rises, thankfully. And that has to be a very kind of depressing situation. If you're used to it, whatever. But specifically, I'm speaking of the project. I'm not speaking of fancy high rises in Manhattan where there's penthouses and all of that stuff. I'm talking about high rises that are 20 stories that have apartments basically packed in there. It's kind of like living in a depressing government-funded, government-designed building that is really meant to just wear at you mentally and physically. Like, every day, if I had to go home to a building that I hated living in, I would be very depressed. Like, not just because of the building, but the way the building looks and the energy that it gives off, the people who live there, all of that noise if you're living in a apartment building that has that many families in it. So my point is to say, yes, America as a society has done different things to try to help the black community, but a lot of those things have actually hurt the black communities. We all know that welfare has hurt the black community. You can't tell women, hey, you know, we'll give you money as long as there's no man in the house and all of that stuff, because that ruins families, that breaks families up. You have created single motherhood in black communities policies, and that has not been helpful either. So my point is that the things that we have tried to do to help Black America in this country, these are kind of low vibrational things that we have done, and it really hasn't produced the result that everybody thinks that it should have. Yes, you can say that there are some people who have made it out of the hood or have made it out of really harsh conditions in America because they are Black, but that doesn't mean that just because some people made it out, that means that the people who haven't made it out aren't doing enough, because there are people who are genuinely struggling and they really just can't get out of that depressing environment. And then you also have people who thrive in that environment. That's all they know. They don't want to leave that environment. They are proud of that environment. So I don't think it's fair to say, hey, we have given Black people enough means to uplift themselves and better their lives. They haven't done anything with it as a whole collective community. I don't think it's fair to say that just because some people have made it out. I think you really need to look at the system, look at the conditions that Black people are living in, and really try to work on finding better ways to address those issues. Now, interestingly, I don't really see people criticizing the business model that America was founded on. So we know that the industry of early America was growing things like farming, and we know that they initially first sent over European colonizers, and it should tell you something that they did not have the workforce to naturally and voluntarily do this labor. So white people back in Europe, they did not want to come to America to do this work, so that left them scrambling to figure out who they could get to do this work. And I think that shows you the flaw in their business plan, that they did not at once pivot to figure out what they could do to incentivize people to want to do this work. They tried to force the Native Americans to do this. They tried to force Black people to do this, and they were successful in getting Black people to do this. But it's not because Black people were weak or whatever. It was because Black people were put through a lot of stress and trauma and really forced to do this work in horrible conditions that they were unable to escape. I also want to distribute the blame, and I want to acknowledge that we also have to hold people in Africa accountable, because there were Africans who stole other Africans into slavery. Now, we know that the transatlantic slave trade is not the same as how servitude and indentured servants were treated in the old world, but I think it's important to acknowledge that even if you didn't know it was going to turn out the way that it did, or you were blind to what was going on, if you actively sold other people into slavery, you are to blame, because you knew that at the very least you were giving them a fate of having to serve somebody else and do their bidding for X number of years, and you knew that they were going to have to be in debt to someone else. So I don't think it gives you a pass to say, hey, we didn't know it was going to be this bad, my bad. I don't think it's that easy to kind of just brush it off and absolve yourself of responsibility. I think that we should really be looking at people who are willingly wanting to trade other people, to sell other people for profit. That is literally human trafficking, and in today's society, we would hold people accountable if they were involved in that. We would not allow them to say, hey, you stole this person, but you didn't know how bad it was going to be. It's not your fault. That's not a thing. That would never happen here in these times. So I think it is important that we acknowledge the role that people in Africa played in what happened to people who were part of the transatlantic slave trade. Okay, so since we are talking about culture, I want to talk about American culture. At this point, if it's not already clear, you should know that American culture was founded on greed, on profit, and forced manual labor that other people were doing in order to help certain people get rich, to help the powerful and the people in charge get rich. So America has always been a country where people can get rich at the expense of other people, and this has resulted in the decline of American culture, even though historically that has always been what America has been about the forced labor, of getting rich off of other people. We have more people who are kind of benefiting from the American colony, where before it was just a select few. Now the wealth is kind of more widespread, to where you have people who are getting paid well for some of their jobs and all of that stuff, and the wealth is a little bit more distributed than it would have been, and so people are willing to overlook the capitalistic society that we live in that allows other people to get rich at the expense of other people doing the actual work. So we can think of the music industry. We know that artists have horrible contracts, like in particular, I'm speaking about Black artists. They have horrible music contracts. They are selling horrible music to the Black community in particular because that is their audience, and they are reinforcing that degenerate behavior. And so yes, the artist, the Black artist who is producing those songs is getting rich and is making money, but the person who is allowing him to do that, the person who owns his record company, the person who gave him that contract, they are making a whole lot more money off of that one artist, and they in turn are able to impact a whole community of people just because of one song, one album, one artist who is able to reach so many people. And in talking about American culture, I really dispel and hate the notion that America was a country created by white people and for white people. Yes, you can say that the country, United States of America, was founded by white people, but the continent of North America was not just inhabited by white people. There were Native Americans here, there were Black people here, there were white people of different nationalities. So I really think that those people who founded America, they did everyone today a huge disservice in creating a country that only thought about white people. And to tie all of this back to the all-white community in Arkansas and the whole mission of return to the land, there are a lot of people who are pointing out that they want to return to the land, and the land that they are living on was once Native American territory and Native American land. So I think it is super ironic that we have people who want to live the way their ancestors did when they first came to America, but they're not acknowledging that there were people here when European settlers came to America. They did not adjust themselves to fit Native American culture. They forced Native Americans to embrace their culture. They forced African people to adopt to their culture. So I think it is backwards that you can say, hey, we created America, this is a country for white people, without acknowledging that you took another race's property, their land, and all of that stuff, and then when you came here, you did not adopt to their ways, their customs of living, and then now you want to say, hey, you know, you need to adopt to our way of living if you're going to come to our country in today's climate from another country. Okay, so to tie all of this together, I do want to give two analogies. The first example, or the first analogy that I'm going to give, is Britney Spears. So this is crazy to give an analogy of a white person when we're talking about Black people, but I do think that this is a very good analogy, so bear with me. So we should all know who Britney Spears is. She was from the Mickey Mouse Club. She was a very, very, very popular singer in the late 90s, early 2000s. She had a lot of health issues and issues in general in the early mid 2000s. She was in a conservatorship from 2008 to 2021, and what we have basically happening with Britney Spears is that when she was in that conservatorship, she was forced to work, she was forced to generate a profit for other people, and if you're not catching on, this is the American culture that allowed this to happen. And the problem with all of this is that we have forced Britney to work, we have medicated her, we have given her her freedom, but now she's crazy. And if you look at her Instagram, you can kind of see why people think that she is crazy. However, I want to connect all of the effects and the aftermath of everything with Britney Spears to the plight of the Black community in America. And what I'm speaking to here is just kind of having to deal with this harsh history of American slavery, being treated like you're less than, not being treated like you're equal to someone of a different race just because of your skin color, and having to constantly live in that world and function like a normal person. So we know that because of everything that happened to her, the stress and the trauma that she was forced to endure, we know that Britney Spears cannot function like a normal person again. So if you think of that in the terms of Black people, that happened to millions of Black people, and it happened generation after generation. With just one person, Britney Spears, that situation is easy to manage. You can put her back in a conservatorship, you can manage her, you can find the right people to manage her, and you can make decisions for her, and she cannot make sound decisions for herself. But you cannot do that with an entire group of people, and we have tried to do that with the Black community. We tried welfare, we tried different things to help the Black people survive in a world post the transatlantic slave trade, but those things things are not working. Those things do not actually benefit the Black community. And so with this example of Britney Spears, yes, we gave her her freedom. Yes, we gave Black slaves their freedom, but it was not done in a way that was truly acknowledging the damage that was done. You cannot force people to work in horrible conditions. You cannot use them for profit for your own gain and then think that you can give them their freedom and think that they are going to be okay and able to function. And a lot of trauma is generational. It is passed down from parent to offspring, and I don't think that we talk about that enough in terms of the Black community. So yes, the Black people who are alive today were not directly affected by slavery, but all of that trauma is passed down generationally, and they're still feeling some effects of it. So the point that I want to make is that all of this was allowed to happen because of American culture, everything with Britney Spears and everything with the Black community. I don't think that we can ignore the responsibility that the people who were in charge then, and then also collective American culture, American society. I don't think that we can ignore the responsibility that needs to be acknowledged in saying that this was allowed to happen. You can't just say, hey, well, we freed the slaves, we made things right by making changes to the law, but there's still a lot of things that are happening today that make it very difficult for people to live in a mixed race society. So again, I want to reinforce what I said earlier. Yes, you can give Black people their freedom. You can try different things to make it better for them to uplift and succeed as a society, but you cannot say that just because some people made it out of that environment, that means that you as a society, as American society, are doing everything that you are supposed to help uplift those people. You can't say that, oh, well, it's not the system, it's them, it's not us. We've done everything we can. They just don't want to better their lives. I don't think it's as simple as that. Okay, so the next analogy I want to give is the example of a book, and this book is representing Christianity and also European colonization. So in this example, say that you have an author who writes a book, they self-publish the book, and they make the book available to the general public, but nobody actually knows that this book is available. So how people would discover the book is in natural ways, simply by either looking on Amazon, looking on Kobo, whatever. That's how they would find out about the book. So they would buy it, they would read it. And from there, what they would do is they would tell their friends about the book, depending on what their experience is. That's called word of mouth. In terms of the book, they can have 3 different reactions. 1, why didn't I find out about this book much sooner? 2, they can read the book and say, it's okay, not really too concerned about it, whatever. The 3rd reaction is they have no motivation or desire to read the book, and they completely reject it in that sense if they're not willing to read it. So in terms of Christianity and European colonization, I think that the general consensus is that everyone should be grateful for the spread of Christianity. Everyone should be grateful for the spread of European colonization. They should perceive European colonization as, why didn't this happen sooner? I'm so happy and grateful that this happened. I think that this is a very flawed approach to perceiving or thinking of European colonization. They use this stigma with the sub-Saharan African population. They say, hey, because some people in sub-Saharan Africa did not find out about the gospel, about Christianity until 200 years ago, this means that they are backwards, that they are inferior. And so my pushback to that is to say, well, yes, you can say, hey, you didn't know about this, so this means you're stupid, this means you're bad, this means you're inferior. However, if you flip it, you can say, hey, why did it take you so long to spread the gospel, to spread the Christianity to me? So really, they're shifting the blame to the African and saying, hey, there's something wrong with you, but you didn't know about this much sooner. How dare you reject this? Why would you reject this? The only right response to Christianity, European colonization, is that you should be grateful that we are doing this for you. And I don't like this approach because, one, it assumes that all European colonization was good, that what they did was a huge benefit to the rest of the world. And I know that America is big on spreading democracy, and people have mixed opinions on that as far as whether or not it's good for America to get involved in other countries and change their way of life. And so I do want to stress here, I don't think that all progress is good progress, and we can't assume that everyone should be grateful for progress. We need to give people the opportunity to hear about something, to learn about something, and reject it if they prefer their own own way of life. So because religion has been weaponized and people have used religion to justify things like slavery, depending on how they were interpreting the Bible and all of that stuff in the times of American slavery, and then also it's very difficult to say now that religion is the moral standard, or that any one religion is the moral standard for how people should behave. And now I want to give one last analogy. So this is going to be an analogy that really hits home at the power of not knowing what you don't know. So in this example, say somebody rides a bike 5 miles to work each day. In most cases, for that person, if they have no concept of a car, a bike is going to be much better than walking. So if you had to walk 5 miles to work each day, you would probably really hate that. However, there are advantages to riding a bike to work. One, you need to be physically fit to make that journey, and then also two, a bike gets you there much faster than walking would. In this sense, someone would be very grateful for a bike because that means that they don't have to walk. Now, if you are someone who knows about cars, you would say, hey, a car is much better. Let me give you this car instead of a bike. So obviously a car can get you somewhere faster and it can get you to places that are further away. However, what people don't take into consideration is that having a car can actually make your life more difficult, because with the bike, one, you have to be physically fit to ride the bike to work. Two, you don't really have to spend much on maintaining a bike. Literally, you can just spend your money on the things that you need to survive in your day-to-day life. Now, if you introduce a car into the mix, you need to worry about car insurance, gas. If you have an EV vehicle, you need to be able to charge it somewhere, and then you also need to be able to service and maintenance the car. So now, all of a sudden, you need a lot more money to buy a car and to be financially responsible for all of the things associated with having a car. So in this analogy, you can think of the car as European colonization. You can say that there's this perception that the car is better. We've made everything better by giving you guys the car, by introducing you to the car. But in doing so, you lose appreciation for the simple way of living. You lose appreciation for the ability to ride a bike. You lose the appreciation for the ability to walk somewhere. And so in the examples that I've given, I think that we need to really appreciate the fact that some people may just reject the car. They may just want to ride their bike, or if they don't even have the means to get a bike, they may be okay with walking. I don't think we should judge people and force them to adopt to a particular way of living based on our standards. Now, with me saying that, I don't want people to assume, but I think that that means that if you have a culture where you can behave in degenerate ways, or you can break laws, or you can just really make it difficult for people to have a nice life, that's not what I'm saying at all. In all cultures, at the foundation, you should be able to be polite, respectful of other people. You should behave in ways that make you proud of how you're acting. You shouldn't behave in ways that you may be embarrassed by, or that other people would be embarrassed by, especially if you're doing things that you shouldn't be doing. So I want to make it clear that everyone has the right to the culture that they want to live in, but within American culture, we need to really acknowledge that, one, American culture is flawed just based on the principles of how this country was founded, but we also need to recognize that everyone has the right to live in the areas that they want to live in and to associate with the people that they want to, as long as they are not infringing on the rights of other people or terrorizing other communities. So hopefully my analogies made sense. I really wanted to kind of give general analogies that I think people will understand to help connect all of my points about this one topic of the all-white community in Arkansas. So we haven't spent a lot of this episode talking about that, but I really wanted to give a historical analysis of all of the things that we really should be talking about when we are examining whether or not this is a good thing that is happening, or whether it's a bad thing, or if it's even something that you should care about. Alrighty, so to wrap up this episode, I want to make it clear that I think that people should be allowed to live in the communities that they want to live in. However, I want to make it clear that all races should be able to have their separate spaces. I didn't talk about this earlier, but I did not point out the hypocrisy of wanting a whites-only community when in the past we have tried to have all Black communities. Specifically, I'm referring to Black Wall Street, which was in Tulsa, and this was a very successful and thriving community in the Black community, and this was burned down. So we have, as a country, as a society, we have done things to not allow Black people to be successful and to have their own spaces. So welfare and all of that stuff as far as the Black communities the Black only spaces that we have today, a lot of it was done to right historical wrong. So this is a very different approach to what this all-white community is doing. So I do find the hypocrisy in wanting to self-segregate yourself now and feel entitled to having your own space when you've actively, as a people, white people have prevented Black people from having their own successful community and have actively done things to hurt and harm the Black community and not allow them to succeed. Additionally, I want to make it clear that I think all people should be able to have all Black communities, all white communities, all whatever race communities, and I also think that we should have mixed race communities. I am someone who wants to live in a mixed race community. The neighborhood that I live in is mostly white. There are minorities here, but I can't imagine living in a world where it's only, obviously I'm Black, so I would live in an all Black world, but I can't imagine living in a country where everything is so racially divided that people can no longer intermingle with people of different races. I really do think that we have a melting pot of a culture and we all influence each other with our different cultures, and I mean that in a positive way. So I really think that we should focus on having a mixed race society, and if there are people who want to self-segregate, they should be able to do that as long as they are not making things difficult for other people. If we remove people who don't want to have a mixed race society, that just allows everyone else who is okay with that and who does want that to be able to form better relationships and better coexist with each other. Now, going back to the all-white community in Arkansas, I am actually very curious about how all of this is going to turn out. I do think that this is an experiment in the sense of them building a complete new town from scratch. I know that people mention in other comments and videos that I've seen that we do have sundown towns or all-white towns already. I think that this is a unique approach because this is something that is being built from scratch. And so I do have a lot of questions about how exactly all of this is going to be done. Are they building the building? I know that they have lots where people can buy to build houses. I know that they're planning to build a school and all of that stuff. And I don't know how exactly they're building this. Are they using the trees where they are to literally build all of this themselves? Or are they hiring contractors to help them build this community? So I do have a lot of questions about how they are sourcing all of this stuff to build this community. Are they wanting to only live in this community, meaning that once people move there, they are never going to leave, they are never going to venture outside of the 160 acres of property? Are they only going to be in that community and they're never going to come out? If they need something from the grocery store, are they going to be able to go to the grocery store that services minorities and non-Christians and all of that stuff? So how exactly is all of that going to work? I know that this whole concept for the community in Arkansas is founded on or based on a model of a community in South Africa, and that community has gotten a lot of criticism. And I'm also curious about what kind of people are drawn to this whole experiment, because one, you're sacrificing a lot. You are not like the Amish. You have not been segregated this whole time from minorities. You've been living in the modern world. You've been interacting with minorities. And so now, in that sense, you are giving up a lot of stuff. You're giving up conventional stores, conventional restaurants, conventional public spaces for people to go to entertainment, like the movies, public parks, and all of that stuff. Yes, you may create your own variation of that in your tiny community, but you are really giving up a lot of stuff that you currently have access to. And so I'm very curious about what kind of people are drawn to live this way. Obviously, because they are talking about returning to the land and living in a simple way, I'm instantly thinking about people who farm or people who do blue collar work. And I'm also wondering if these people already have their own land or their own houses, because if you are someone who has your own property and your own land, the idea of people buying their own land and their own property is so that you can live the way that you want to, and you are kind of in a more rural area in that sense of what I'm thinking of. You can live in the suburbs. You don't really have control over who your neighbors are. Yes, when you pick a house, you're picking a house based on how it looks and all of that stuff, and maybe who lives next door if you have that much control over it. But if you really like the house, you might just sacrifice that. But when I think of people buying property, they're doing that, one, to have less neighbors, and two, to control the environment that they are living in. So if you are someone who already has your own land and property, why would you sell that to come live in this community? So I'm very curious about the type of people who are drawn to this and who want to live in this environment. Alrighty, so I'm definitely wrapping up this video now. Hopefully everything I've said in this episode has landed in some way. I really wanted to try to talk about different topics that I think need to be considered when you look at this issue from a historical lens. Again, people can do whatever they want. They can have the communities that they want to live and thrive in. But I think it is important to acknowledge that this was a self-created problem by European colonizers, European settlers who came to America and kind of forced everyone to have a mixed race society. And by leaving to create your own society and expecting other people to do the same, it's just running away from the problems that you created. And there is a better solution to all of this for people who want to live in a racially mixed society. And we really have to work on coming together as a society, as a people, to figure out the best way to resolve racial tensions and to make things better for everyone. So that's all I got for you. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.